Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Revelation Part 7. This is a teaching that I did this past Shabbat, but we had some technical issues with our camera, and I was not able to record. So I'm redoing it again, this time from home. So the series will be complete, so no one will miss Part 7. Okay? So, part seven, we're going to look at Revelations chapters 8 and 9, and it's about the seventh seal and the blowing of the first six trumpets. Okay? Now, 2 weeks ago, we did part six, and it was on Revelation 7, and it was about the 144,000. You will find that teaching on our YouTube channel. But before we did um, part six, in part five, we looked at the opening of the first six seals. Okay, so I need to just talk about that briefly because tonight we're talking about the seventh seal. So you need to know what happened in the first six seals because it's more or less the continuation. Okay, so remember we saw the first seal, it was about deception, meaning like um, false false teachers, false messiahs, right? The second seal is about war. The third about famine. The fourth seal about pestilence or plagues. The fifth seal is about the martyr of saints. And the sixth seal is the great quake, the great earthquake that's going to shake the whole earth. And as we talked about, this would be the trigger for the beginning of the end. Okay? So, what's interesting about these, um, these seals is that Yeshua himself, in the first century, he was asked by his disciples, how will we know when the end of time is going to come? Let's read about it right here in Matthew 24, verse 3 to 8. It says, as he, Yeshua, was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, tell us, when will these things happen? What will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And Yeshua answered them, be careful that no one leads you astray. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they will lead many astray. Now, remember what we said the first seal was? Deception. And what does he say the first thing's going to be? Deception. Isn't that interesting? Then he says, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. What's the second plague? Wars. But see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things much happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines. That's the third seal. Pestilence, the fourth seal, and earthquakes, the sixth seal. The fifth seal being the martyr of the saints. And it says, in various places, the earthquakes, all these are the beginning of birth pains. So isn't that interesting how Yeshua, well, he knew exactly what was going to happen and when. He's giving it to us in exactly the same order as the seals. Okay? And as we said, the first five seals were open on the day that Yeshua ascended to heaven. When he first arrived, they handed them these rolls, and he opened the first seal and the second seal. He opened five of them on that very first day. He did not open yet the sixth seal, which is the great earthquake, because you will know when he opens it, because the whole world will shake. It says every mountain will move and every island will be moved from its place. It's going to be a major earthquake that has not yet happened. So the sixth seal has not yet arrived. But now that we've reviewed the first six seals, let's move on to the seventh seal, okay? And we find that in Revelations chapter 8. Let's start verse 1. When he, Yeshua, opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Now, there is much silence about verse 1 by most prophecy teachers. It's interesting because, you know, when you study Revelations or all the prophecies, it's alwaase very precise when it talks about time. It will tell you 3.5 years, or it will tell you it's 1,260 days. It's always very precise. So this verse that says about half an hour, it's about this leads me to think that, you know what? It's not about the time. What you need to notice in this verse, it's about the word silence. Okay? Why do I say that? Well, I can't help but think that the word silence here made me think of Romans 3, verse 19. Now we know that whatever the law says, it says to those who are under the law, so that every mouth may be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God. So could it be that this half hour of silence in heaven, God is slamming his gavel down and saying, order in the court, silence, giving all one last chance to come clean, to make it right before the judgment begins? This does make sense since the trumpets are judgment and war, and they will take place right after this half-hour period. And look what God's instructions, speaking about war, look at what God's instructions are just before war. We find it in the Torah and Deuteronomy 20, verse 10. It says, when you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. Here we see specific instructions for Israel to offer peace before engaging into battle. God is the one coming to make war here in Revelations 8. So according to Deuteronomy 20, he will offer his peace one last time. If the world does not accept his terms of peace, they face judgment, and judgment will begin. This lines up again with Ezekiel 18:32, where God says, for I take no pleasure in the death of anyone, declares Yahweh. Repent and live. So this is his offer of peace during this half hour of silence. I think this is it right before the trumpet sounds. So it is from here in Revelations 8 that we see the seven angels with the seven trumpets come forward. But just before the angels blow their trumpets, in verse 3 through 5, we're going to see them right now, it explains that another angel comes forward, and he hurls a censer filled with fire from the altar in heaven down to earth, resulting in an earthquake taking place. We then see the trumpets follow. So peace was just offered and the trumpets begin. Let's not forget that trumpets are always used to signify war. Now, could these trumpets be God's declaration of war? Well, let's look at the first four trumpets. Now, one thing I want to say about the trumpets. Do the trumpets in Revelations 8 make these events happen? Or are they simply proclaiming what's already coming as a result of something else? Let's read it. Then I saw the seven angels who stand before God, and seven trumpets were given to them. Another angel came and stood at the altar, holding a golden incense burner. He was given much incense to offer up, along with the prayers of all the saints, upon the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense and the prayers of the saints rose before God from the angel's hand. Then the angel took the incense burner and filled it with fire from the altar, and he threw it to the earth. And there were clashes of thunder and rumblings of flashes and flashes of lightning and earthquakes. Then the seven angels holding the seven trumpets prepared to sound them. So you see, as a result of the fire being hurled to earth, an earthquake or many earthquakes happen. No, this happens just before they start blowing the trumpets. And I believe that this earthquake is what causes the events of the few trumpets, not that the blowing of the trumpets causes them to happen. Okay? And you'll see why I think that way in the next few slides. Now, you say, wait a minute, another earthquake? But you just said the Great Quake, right? The sixth seal was the whole world shook. Now they're talking about more earthquakes? Well, I don't believe it's more earthquakes. I believe they're talking about the exact same earthquake of the sixth seal. After the sixth seal, remember, of Revelations, there was a huge earthquake. We saw that in chapter 7, okay? Sorry, in chapter 6. And then in chapter 7, we take a break. And it talks about the 144,000. It's got nothing to do with the seals, right? And then we come back to chapter 8, and we find the opening of the seventh seal, and it begins with an earthquake. Well, I believe that the earthquake of Revelations 8 is the details spelled out of the event that takes place in the sixth seal, the great quake. I believe that the earthquake of Revelations 8 is the one and the same earthquake that we read about in Revelation 6. Now, you might say, well, Jean, that sounds strange. And I know, but we have a North American mindset where we are linear thinkers. We think first A happens, then B, and then C happens, and then D, and E, and so on. Everything is one thing after the other. But in the Hebrew mindset, that's not how they work. They work in a circular fashion. First, they'll hit one point, they'll hit a second point, a third, maybe a fourth, and then they'll come back again and talk about the first point, giving more details about it. And this happens, we find that all over the Bible. And you might say, well, I don't understand. Well, let me show you an example. Let's start right at the very beginning of the Bible, right? Genesis chapter 1. Let's read about that. Everyone knows this story. It's about the creation. So we read about day 6 of creation in Genesis 1, verse 27. It says, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, Adam and Eve. He created them, right? And we know he did this on the sixth day. That's the last thing that he did after all the rest of the creation. And then we read chapter 2, verse 1 to 3. So the heavens and the earth were completed along with the entire array. God completed on the seventh day his work that he made, and he ceased on the seventh day from all his work that he made. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. He made it holy. For on it, on Shabbat, he ceased from all his work that God created for the purpose of preparing. So we see it's complete. The creation is complete. The seventh day he rested. Everything is created. Everything. But then look, 4 verses later. Then Adonai Elohim formed a man out of the dust from the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils a breath of life. So the man became a living being. What is this? You've read this before. Is this a new man now that God created? I thought all the creation was finished. It was. All the creation was finished in chapter 1. But here in chapter 2, after the seventh day, they go back and they revisit the sixth day, right? And talk about how God actually created man. Because all that was said up there, it was he was created in God's image, male and female. They were created. But here in chapter 2, it gives us the details, how he did it. He formed them out of the dust of the ground. He breathed into his nostrils. And then further on, and we won't show it, but further on in chapter 2, it talks about how God put Adam asleep, took one of his ribs and created Eve. But you see, all this is not a new Eve, a new Adam. It's the same ones that were made in chapter 1. He's just giving more details. And so what I'm telling you is Revelations 8 earthquake is the details of the Revelation 6 great quake in the sixth seal. We see that it all happened when the angel threw down the censer with fire. It caused these earthquakes. And now they're giving us more details. And you'll see the repercussion of that. Okay? So let's move on and look at trumpet number 1. It says in verse 7, the first angel trumpeted, and there was hail and fire mixed with blood, and they were thrown upon the earth. A third of the earth burnt up, a third of the trees burnt up, and all the green grass burnt up. Now, many believe that this could be an asteroid coming to Earth, and that is certainly possible. But how would an asteroid cause hail and fire mixed with blood? Now, let me offer a suggestion. What if the source of the hail and the fire mixed with blood were actually the result of a volcano? And you'll say to me, but John, it says that the hail and the fire mixed with blood were thrown down upon the earth. Well, yes, that's true. But you know, when a volcano erupts, large rocks and lava are shot up, and there's plume. It's like a cloud that can reach up to 25 kilometers in the sky. And as these things fall back down to earth, the lava and the rocks can certainly look like fire mixed with blood being thrown down to earth. Now you'll say to me, but yeah, sure, but this plague is supposed to be affecting the whole world. One volcano cannot affect the whole world, right? Well, that is certainly true. But what if the worldwide earthquake were to stir up and trigger the eruption of multiple volcanoes? Can you imagine what would happen if this worldwide earthquake were to cause every volcano on the planet to go off at the same time? That would definitely affect the whole earth. And I believe that this is exactly what is going to happen in this first trumpet. And it's going to happen when the great quake hits. Have you ever heard of the Ring of Fire? Some call it the Pacific Rim. It measures over 40,000 kilometers. And it is where most of the world's earthquakes and volcanic events take place. According to National Geographic, there are 452 active and dormant volcanoes spread out along the Ring of Fire. 452. And as far as we know, these account for 75% of the world's volcanic activity. Meanwhile, on this Ring of Fire, 90% of the earthquakes occur on this Ring of Fire. Can you imagine? So I believe that the Great Quake will cause every volcano on the planet to go off at the same time, causing lava looking like fire mixed with blood to rise up and to fall back onto the earth. Now, let's look at the next three trumpets, and you will understand again how the Great Quake is really the trigger of these first four trumpets. Trumpet number 2. The second angel trumpeted, and something like a huge mountain ablaze with fire was thrown into the sea. A third of the sea turned into blood. A third of the creatures living in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. Now, certainly, mountain ablaze, it sounds like a volcano, right? We've seen pictures of that falling into the sea. But uh, in apocalyptic language, usually a mountain represents either a nation or a country. So, if that's true, that would mean that a nation ablaze would be thrown into the sea. Is that possible? Well, there is one nation, one country that is on the Ring of Fire, and that is an island at sea. You know which country that is? Japan. We see it right here. That red circle, the yellow in the center, that's Japan. It's an island in the Pacific Ocean. It's right on the Ring of Fire. And it's subject to earthquakes. In fact, in 2011, there was a 9.0 earthquake, and the island of Japan was measured to have moved by 8 inches. Now, could a worldwide quake actually cause Japan to go under, meaning to be thrown into the sea, as we read about? If so, that would obviously cause an unbelievably large tsunami that could cause many ships to be destroyed. We read that 1/3 of the ships will be destroyed in Revelations 8:9, right? Also, it says here that 1/3 of the sea will be turned to blood. People will die. Well, definitely if Japan were to go under, be thrown into the ocean, a lot of people would die that day. But not only that, in Japan, they have multiple nuclear reactors that are said to be 1,000 times more powerful than the nuclear reactor in Chernobyl in Russia. If that was to explode, this could certainly kill 1/3 of the sea creatures and destroy 1/3 of the ships and turn 1/3 of the sea to blood, right? Now, let's look at trumpet number 3. The third angel trumpeted, and a great star fell from the heavens, burning like a torch. It fell on a third of the rivers and on the springs of water. Now, the name of the star is Wormwood, and a third of the waters became wormwood, and many people died from the waters that were made bitter. Now, again, many believe that this could be an asteroid falling to Earth. Well, that could be true, but could the falling star named Wormwood actually be a fallen angel? We're going to look more at that when we get to trumpet number 5, okay? But regarding rivers and springs of water that have turned bitter, think about it for a minute. Between the volcanic ash from the 452 volcanoes and the radioactive waste from the nuclear reactors making its way around the oceans and killing wildlife, do you not think that our clean water sources will be affected? Now, speaking about bitter water, I want to bring something interesting to your attention. In the Torah, one of the 613 instructions is that when a husband suspects his wife of being unfaithful, God gave this provision in Numbers chapter 5. Let's read about it in verse 18. Then the priest will have the woman stand before Adonai, loosen the woman's hair, put into her hands the reminder offering, the offering for jealousy, while in the priest's own hands are the bitter waters that bring a curse. Interestingly, this involves the drinking of bitter water. And God provides this test. And if the wife had been unfaithful, then she would suffer from the bitter water. Let's read about it a few verses later. When she is made to drink the water that carries the curse, if she has defiled herself and been unfaithful to her husband, it will enter her and cause bitterness. Her abdomen will swell and her thigh will waste away. She will be accursed among her people. Obviously, if she has not been unfaithful, she's going to drink that like it was just a glass of water, and it will not affect her. But this is a provision that God made in case a husband were to suspect his wife of being unfaithful. This was a test. And you know what? It parallels what happened at Mount Sinai when Moses made the people drink the powder of the golden calf. Let's read about it. Exodus 32, verse 20. Then he took the calf that they had made. He burnt it with fire, ground it to powder, scattered it on the surface of the water, and he made the sons of Israel drink it. Verse 27, 28. Moses said to them, "This is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says. Every man put on his sword and go to and fro from gate to gate throughout the camp and slay his brother, his friend, and his neighbor." So the sons of Levi did as Moses said, and that day from among the people there fell about 3,000 men. Now, you read this and you wonder, okay, the setting. Moses had gone up on Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments from God. He was up there for 40 days and 40 nights. And in the meantime, the people of Israel said, well, what happened to Moses? And so they made this golden calf and they started to worship it and dance and party around it, okay? Just as Moses is coming down with the two tablets of stone, and he sees this and he is so upset because they're being unfaithful to God, he breaks the tablets, and this is what happens. Okay, he ground up the calf, he burnt it, he ground it up, he put it on scattered it on the water, and he made everybody drink it. Okay, not just some people, everybody. And then you read this where he tells people, okay, now take your sword and go around and kill people. And you think it's just random. They're going around killing just anybody until, till they hit 3,000. But that's not at all it. You see, this parallels the bitter water taste of the unfaithful wife because God is a jealous God. And he did this test with Moses so that they could identify who were the people that had been unfaithful. Those that drank the water and became sick, those are the ones that got killed by the sword. They went around the camp when they would find somebody had been sick from the water, that marked them, that identified them as the guilty party. And so this explains and is the parallel with the bitter water test. Okay? So to bring us back now to the third plague, the third trumpet, sorry. Could it be that the bitter waters from the third trumpet plague is a test of unfaithfulness from God? Well, maybe. The bitter waters identified the guilty adulterers, and then, as we see in Revelation 16, the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. A loud voice came out of the temple from the throne saying, "It is done." Babylon the Great was remembered before God to force her to drink the cup of the wine of his furious wrath. An enormous hail, about 100 pounds each, falls from heaven on the people, and the people curse God because of the plague of hail. So extreme was that plague. This we'll see eventually when we get to chapter 16. But I'm saying, remember when we read Romans 3:19 that every mouth shall be silenced and the whole world held accountable to God? If we all drink that bitter water from the from when the third trumpet is blown, and and it identifies who are the adulterers, who are those that were unfaithful to God, then he can punish the guilty ones, right? That this would definitely force the whole world to be accountable to God. Now, let's move on to trumpet number 4. We find it in verse 12. The fourth angel trumpeted, and a third of the sun, and a third of the moon, and a third of the stars were struck, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day would not shine, as well as a third of the night. Well, note about the one third. There's a lot of this one third. A third of the sun, moon, and stars, they're turned dark. Much like when we read in the first trumpet, one third of the earth burnt up, a third of the trees burnt up, right? Etc. What's with the one third? Well, I told you that I would show you the link between the earthquake and volcano and what would be apparent in these first four trumpets, right? Well, after volcanoes erupt, ash clouds can cover hundreds of square miles, and within hours of eruption, and they can last for many days. You know, in 2010, there was a volcano that went off in Iceland, and it sent ash clouds for hundreds of square miles. I remember because I worked at Transport Canada at the time, and flights going into London Heathrow, it's far from Iceland, they were being affected by this volcano, and it had darkened everything. Now imagine this was just one volcano going off. Imagine 452 volcanoes going off. How much of this darkness, right? The clouds would shut off the sun from going through or the moon from shining through at night. Well, guess what? Back to the Ring of Fire. Interestingly enough, the Ring of Fire covers just over one third of the Earth's surface area. Now, it does not take that much imagination to see that this could be the cause of the one third of the day not to shine. You can't see the sun because one third of the whole planet is covered with cloud. 1/3 of the moon plus stars to be darkened at night. And as we saw, as a result of the earthquakes and tsunamis, 1/3 of the ships to be destroyed, 1/3 of the sea creatures to die with radioactive nuclear reactors falling into the ocean, 1/3 of the sea to turn to blood. This is all linked somehow to the 1/3. And the ring of fire takes up 1/3 of the world's surface area. Coincidence? Maybe. And so I believe that when the great quake happens on the same day, it causes trumpets one, two, three, and four all to happen on the same day, right? The great quake, the sixth seal, which I said is the same as the Revelations 8 earthquakes. The whole world will shake, every mountain will move, islands will be displaced, some thrown into the sea completely, and we we're going to see the results of the first four trumpets. Again, it's not the trumpets that cause these to happen. The trumpets are just blasting as this happens, and then that happens, and that happens, all as a result of the great quake. Okay? And we read about the great quake in Isaiah 24 when we did talked about the sixth seal. And look what Jeremiah 4 talks about. It seems to parallel Isaiah 24. It says, "Oh, my anguish, I writhe in pain. Oh, the agony of my heart. My heart pounds within me. I cannot keep silent, for I have heard the sound of the trumpet. I have heard the battle cry. Disaster follows disaster. The whole land lies in ruins. In an instant, my tents are destroyed, my shelter in a moment. How long must I see the battle standard and hear the sound of the trumpet?" So it says here, disaster follows disaster. And he says, how long must I see the battle standard and hear the sound of the trumpet? Why is he hearing the trumpet so much? Could it be, again, that these four trumpets of Revelation, they take place one after the other on the same day, the day of the great quake? Let's continue. Jeremiah 4. My people are tools. They do not know me. They are senseless children. They have no understanding. They are skilled in doing evil. They know not how to do good. I looked at the earth, and it was formless and empty, and at the heavens, and their light was gone. I looked at the mountains, and they were quaking. All the hills were swaying. I looked, and there were no people. Every bird in the sky had flown away. I looked, and the fruitful land was a desert. All its towns lay in ruins before the Lord, before his fierce anger. This is what the Lord says: the whole land will be ruined, though I will not destroy it completely. Therefore, the earth will mourn, and the heavens above grow dark, because I have spoken and will not relent. I have decided and will not turn back. There's no doubt that this can easily be seen as a parallel to Isaiah 24. And we can truly tie the earthquake of Isaiah 24 to the first four trumpets of Revelation. Now that four of the seven trumpets, what about the last three? Because there's seven trumpets, right? We just seen four of them. What about the last three? Well, look at the next verse in Revelations 8. It says in verse 13, "Then I looked and I heard an eagle crying out with a loud voice as it flew high in the sky, saying, 'Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth, because of the remaining blast of the trumpets the three angels are about to sound.'" There's three left, and these three are going to be even worse than the first four. Can you imagine what we've just heard in the first four, all the ecological disasters? It sounds devastating, right? Think about the even greater devastation that occurs when the final three angels sound. So, the half-hour pause of silence happens here after the great quake and the first four trumpets to give one last chance to people to repent before war starts. Okay? Now, who's ready for the other trumpets? It's going to get bad. Get ready. It starts in chapter 9. Okay? Trumpets 5 and 6 are in chapter 9. Let's look at verse 1 and 2. Then the fifth angel trumpeted, and I saw a star that had fallen from heaven to earth. The key to the bottomless pit was given to him. He opened the pit, and smoke rose from the pit like the smoke of a gigantic furnace. The sun and the air were darkened by the smoke from the pit. So when the fifth angel sounds his trumpet, we see a star that had fallen to earth. Note, this is not just a regular star or an asteroid that fell to earth. This star is given the key to the bottomless pit, and the star opens the pit. Do stars do that kind of stuff? No. But fallen angels do. And one fallen angel in particular was known as a star. I'm talking about Satan, of course. I believe this is Satan. Now, he doesn't fall now. It says one that had fallen. So this is in the past. And we know there's other passages in the Tanakh that talk about Lucifer and how he was thrown from heaven and and that he was the morning star and he was thrown down from heaven. And so this is the star that had fallen from heaven to earth. And now, at this point, at the fifth trumpet, this is when he's given the key to the bottomless pit, and he opens this pit. Okay? And you'll see that in when we get to Revelation 17, it shows us that from this abyss, this pit, the beast power symbolically emerges. Now let's continue reading Revelations 9 about the fifth trumpet. Then from the smoke, from this pit, from this abyss, came locusts upon the earth, and power was given to them like the scorpions have power over the earth. They are told to do no harm to the grass of the earth or any green plant or any tree, but only harm the people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And they were permitted not to kill them, but to torment them for 5 months. And their torment was like the torment of a scorpion when it stings a person. And in those days, people will seek death. People will wish they could die, but they will not be able to. So we see here the forces that are unleashed here are compared to locusts. Because John, this is in the first century, remember, right? When he's writing this, John did not have the words to describe modern weapons of mass destruction. He uses terms like locusts. And he says that these locusts, they don't harm natural vegetation, which usually locusts do. But instead, for 5 months, they cause incapacitating pain, like that of a scorpion. Let's continue. Now, the appearance of the locust was like horses prepared for battle. On their heads were something like crowns of gold, and their faces were like human faces. They had hair like women's hair, and their teeth were like those of lions. They had chests like iron breastplates, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many horse-drawn chariots rushing into battle. They have tails like scorpions with stingers, and in their tails is their power to harm people for 5 months. Again, John is describing in his own first century words what he sees. He can only relate to it. He hasn't seen modern warfare technology. He's never seen a helicopter, a plane, or a tank. So he's describing it as the best he can, like locusts, and he's talking about horses, you know, and scorpions. This is what he's trying to describe what he's seeing. Interestingly, they have as king over them the angel of the abyss. His name in Hebrew is Abaddon, and in Greek he has the name Apollyon. Now, both these names, they mean destroyer, and they're referring, of course, to Satan, the devil. Okay? And he's the one who precipitates the beast's power attack with futuristic weapons. So you see here what we're reading about here in Trumpet 5. It describes an attack by one nation or kingdom on another nation or kingdom. Now, interestingly, you know, Yeshua spoke about this in Matthew 24 again when talking about the end times. He says, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. Now, why does he say that? And how does that differ from when he said, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars? Well, how they differ? Why he had to add something extra there is because this is separate. This is what's happening here in the fifth and sixth trumpet. It says, first of all, nation. That's one nation, not multiple nations, right? Or one kingdom against one other kingdom. It's very specific. Now, could these be these two nations or kingdoms? Could it be the nation of Ishmael against the nation of Israel? Or could these two kingdoms be the kingdom of darkness against the kingdom of God? This is just speculation, but it does seem to be possible. And it only makes sense that this would be the start of the last World War. So we've seen an attack by one nation on another nation. This is trumpet number 5. And then we get to trumpet number 6, where the empire strikes back, if you will. It's the retaliation, a massive retaliation by the other kingdom. Let's read about it in verses 13 to 17. The sixth angel trumpeted, and I heard a single voice from the four horns of the golden altar before God. It said to the sixth angel, the one holding the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So the four angels who had been prepared for the hour and day and month and year were released to kill a third of mankind. The number of mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number. Now, here is how I saw the horses and those riding on them. They had breastplates that were fiery red, hyacinth blue, and sulfur yellow. The heads of the horses were as heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire and smoke and brimstone. Again, John is describing in terms he can relate to. He's talking about horses, right? But we know this is something else because it's out of their mouths come fire, smoke, and brimstone. This is, again, weapons of mass destruction. And this retaliation is pictured as spewing, like I said, fire, smoke, and brimstone, destroying 1/3 of humanity. You know, right now on planet Earth, we're supposed to have a population of about 8.2 billion people. So 1/3 of 8.2 billion, if you do the math, it gives you 2.7 billion people. They were released to kill 2.7 billion people. That is wow. This description fits well with modern nuclear weapons and the devastation they can bring. And evidently, the Euphrates will be the dividing line between the two kingdoms. So when the sixth angel sounds, two events occur. One, the unleashing of nuclear attack and the killing of 2.7 billion people. The other is the massing of the largest army ever assembled on Earth. 200 million soldiers will be on the bank of the Euphrates River. And then we read verse 18 to 21. By these three plagues, 1/3 of mankind was killed by the fire and the smoke and the brimstone that came out of their mouths. For the power of the horses is in their mouths and in their tails. For their tails were like serpents, having heads by which they inflict injuries. But the rest of mankind, those who not killed by these plagues, they did not repent and turn away from the works of their hands. They would not stop worshiping demons and the idols of gold and silver and stone and wood, which cannot even see or hear or walk. And they did not repent and turn away from their murders or their sorceries or their sexual immorality or their stealing. You see here, the earth and its inhabitants, they're going to be reeling from this, what seems to be the very death throes of the planet itself. But this is not the end of the story. There remains one trumpet, the seventh and last trumpet. And we're going to see that in Revelations chapter 11 in 2 weeks. Okay? So I hope you don't miss the next part. It will also be on our YouTube channel. But in conclusion, today we saw the opening of the seventh seal and the blowing of the first six trumpets. The first five seals were opened by Yeshua the very day he ascended to heaven 2,000 years ago. And ever since then, we have seen more and more false prophets, wars, famines, pestilence, and the martyr of saints. And we are awaiting the sixth seal to be opened, the great quake that will be the beginning of the end and that will trigger the first four trumpets to sound in one day. The worldwide quake and 452 volcanoes going off will cause grass and 1/3 of the trees to be burnt, 1/3 of sea turned to blood, and 1/3 of the ships and sea life destroyed. 1/3 of the waters will turn bitter. 1/3 of sun, moon, and stars will stop shining. The last three trumpets are to be worse still. Number 5, one nation or kingdom will rise against another. And then 6, the other nation will retaliate and gather a great army at the Euphrates River. And so in 2 weeks, we will look at Revelations 10 to 12. Okay? Have a blessed evening. Shalom.